Wexner's name was added back.
Within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed.
There was one redaction out of
he's
over
listed as a co-conspirator.
4,700, and we invited you in. This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. He needs to get, you're a failed
What happens when a single question stops the Attorney General in her tracks? Not a partisan attack, not a shouting match. Just one precise question about disappearing names in documents the Department of Justice promised to release. What followed was not outrage, but silence. The kind of silence that makes an entire room hold its breath. It was Tuesday morning inside the House Judiciary Committee. Cameras lined the walls, reporters filled every seat. Attorney General Pam Bondi arrived confident, flanked by legal advisors. The hearing had already been tense, focused on redacted files tied to a high-profile investigation. For nearly 90 minutes, the exchange followed a familiar script. Questions, deflections, political jabs, the chairman's gavel striking repeatedly to restore order. Then Congressman Thomas Massie took the floor. Calm, measured, no raised voice, just one topic: redactions. Massie held up a released document. Every line blacked out. "This is transparency?" he asked. Nervous laughter spread through the chamber. Bondi defended the redactions as necessary, protecting victims, safeguarding investigations, preserving national security. But Massie wasn't finished. He presented another document. Same file, different timestamp. He pointed out that within 40 minutes of earlier questioning, additional layers of redaction had been applied. "Who made that decision?" he asked. "And why so quickly?" The room shifted. This was no longer about politics. It was about process, about timing, about who has authority to alter public records in real time. Bondi began explaining classification procedures and interagency consultations. Then came the moment. In the heat of defending her office, Bondi said the words, "After you caught me red-handed." The room froze. Silence fell. Thick, heavy, unmistakable. 67 seconds passed without a response to Massie's follow-up question. Massie repeated her words back to her, calmly. "If I caught you red-handed, what exactly was I catching you doing?" No accusation, just the question. Cameras zoomed in, advisors whispered urgently, but the answer never came. He introduced a third document, showing multiple layers of digital redactions. He argued that metadata suggested the edits traced back to the Attorney General's office. Bondi maintained the changes were lawful and necessary. The exchange escalated. Some members appeared stunned, others avoided eye contact, journalists typed furiously. What began as routine oversight had transformed into a defining confrontation over transparency and accountability. Massie insisted the issue was simple. If names are removed, the public deserves to know why. Bondi insisted protections were justified. The chairman attempted to move on, but the question lingered in the room long after time expired. By afternoon, clips of the silence spread across social media. Analysts debated whether it signaled hesitation or strategy. Supporters on both sides framed the moment differently. But one thing was undeniable. The hearing had shifted the narrative. This wasn't about party lines anymore. A Republican congressman had challenged a Republican-appointed attorney general in public view. That alone made headlines. The larger question now hangs unresolved. Were the redactions routine legal safeguards, or evidence of something more deliberate? Investigations continue. Documents are under further review, and the public is watching closely. Sometimes in Washington, the loudest moment isn't a shout, it's silence. And in that silence, a single unanswered question can echo far beyond the hearing room. In the hours that followed, legal experts began dissecting every second of the exchange. Some argued the silence meant nothing, simply a pause before counsel could advise. Others said the optics were damaging, suggesting uncertainty at the highest level of the Justice Department. At the center of the debate is a technical but critical issue. Who authorizes redactions, and under what authority can those redactions be modified after public release? In federal procedure, documentation leaves digital footprints, timestamps, user credentials, review chains. Massie's claim focused on timing. If additional redactions were applied within minutes of scrutiny, was that routine quality control or reactive containment? Bondi's office has maintained that updates are common when documents require further protection. Still, perception matters. Transparency is not only about legality, it's about public trust. When documents appear heavily blacked out, confidence erodes, even if the redactions are technically justified. Members of both parties now face pressure. Democrats are demanding independent review. Some Republicans are calling for internal clarification rather than public escalation. The political implications are widening beyond the original hearing. Meanwhile, advocacy groups are asking a broader question. How much transparency should the public expect in sensitive criminal investigations? Victim protection, due process, and national security often collide with demands for full disclosure. The Department of Justice has not indicated any wrongdoing. Officials state that classification and redaction decisions involve layered legal review. They emphasize that protecting identities, whether victims, witnesses, or uncharged individuals, is standard practice. Yet the image remains powerful, a congressman asking a direct question and an attorney general pausing for more than a minute before responding. In today's media environment, moments like that take on lives of their own. As further document audits begin, analysts will examine metadata, authorization logs, and revision histories. If everything aligns with procedure, the controversy may fade. If discrepancies appear, oversight could intensify. For now, the story is less about conclusions and more about accountability. A single exchange has reopened a debate over transparency at the highest levels of government. And until clearer answers emerge, that silence will continue to echo. Oversight committees are now signaling follow-up inquiries, requests for clarification letters, internal memos, and procedural explanations may soon move from rhetoric to formal documentation. The question is whether this remains a political flashpoint or becomes a procedural audit. Legal scholars point out that redaction authority is broad but not unlimited. It must align with statutory standards, court precedents, and internal DOJ policy. Any deviation, intentional or not, can trigger review mechanisms. At the same time, former prosecutors caution against rushing to conclusions. High-profile investigations often involve overlapping jurisdictions, sealed indictments, and protective orders that limit what can be publicly disclosed. What makes this different is the visibility. The confrontation wasn't buried in paperwork, it unfolded live. Millions watched in real time. In modern politics, perception can move faster than formal findings. Now the focus shifts to documentation. If the redaction timeline matches established procedure, the controversy may settle into partisan disagreement. If inconsistencies surface, calls for deeper inquiry will grow louder. Regardless of outcome, the hearing underscored something fundamental. Transparency is no longer optional in the digital age. Every edit leaves a trail. Every pause invites interpretation. And so the broader issue remains, not simply what was redacted, but how decisions are explained when public trust is on the line. In Washington, silence can be strategic, but it can also be defining. As reviews continue, the public waits for clarity. The unanswered question still hangs in the air, not as an accusation, but as a demand for explanation. Because in matters of justice, confidence depends on openness, and when transparency is questioned, even a single moment of silence can reshape the entire conversation. In the days ahead, much will depend on documentation rather than rhetoric. Written explanations, internal directives, and digital logs may clarify whether the redactions followed routine safeguards or triggered additional review under pressure. If oversight panels obtain access to revision histories, the timeline will matter. Who accessed the files? When were changes made? Were they scheduled updates or responses to emerging scrutiny? For Bondi, the challenge is restoring confidence. Even lawful decisions can appear questionable without detailed explanation. Public trust in the Justice Department depends not only on legality, but on perceived fairness. For Massie, the moment elevated his role as an internal critic. Challenging leadership within one's own party carries political risk, but it also reframes the issue beyond partisan alignment. Observers note that hearings rarely hinge on a single exchange, yet occasionally one question captures a larger tension between transparency and protection, oversight and authority. As further reviews unfold, the controversy may resolve quietly or expand into a deeper institutional reckoning. For now, the central issue remains unresolved, and the silence that followed that question continues to define the story. Beyond the immediate controversy, the episode raises structural questions about how sensitive information is managed in the digital era. Modern document systems allow rapid edits, layered protections, and remote authorization. That flexibility improves security, but it also demands stronger transparency protocols. Congressional oversight exists precisely for moments like this. Lawmakers are tasked with ensuring executive agencies operate within both the letter and spirit of the law. When friction surfaces publicly, it reflects the tension built into the system itself. Public reaction has been divided. Some view the exchange as proof of aggressive accountability, others see it as political theater amplified by viral clips. In reality, both interpretations can coexist in today's media environment. The long-term impact may not depend on that 67-second pause alone, but on what follows: documented explanations, procedural transparency, and whether confidence is reinforced or weakened. For now, the story remains open-ended. A question was asked, an answer was delayed, and in that gap between question and response, a national conversation about trust, power, and transparency began, one that may outlast the hearing itself. As document reviews move forward, investigators may rely on independent auditors to verify digital trails. In high-stakes cases, outside validation can help separate political interpretation from technical fact. Transparency mechanisms, such as Inspector General Oversight or bipartisan review panels, could play a decisive role. Their findings may determine whether the controversy fades into routine clarification or escalates into formal inquiry. For the Justice Department, credibility is its most valuable asset. Prosecutorial authority depends on public confidence that decisions are impartial and legally grounded. When that confidence is questioned, even briefly, the impact can be lasting. For Congress, the responsibility is equally significant. Oversight must be rigorous but responsible, ensuring accountability without undermining lawful protections for victims and ongoing investigations. In the end, the defining issue may not be what was hidden, but whether the system proves capable of explaining itself clearly. Institutions are tested not when everything runs smoothly, but when scrutiny intensifies. Until further documentation is released, the debate will continue. Analysts, lawmakers, and the public alike will wait for verifiable answers rather than speculation. And perhaps that is the lasting takeaway. In a democracy, even a moment of silence can trigger examination. What follows that silence, facts, clarity, and accountability, will ultimately shape how this chapter is remembered. In Washington, controversies often burn brightly and then fade, but some moments linger because they tap into deeper concerns about transparency and institutional power. This exchange may become one of those reference points in future debates. If formal findings confirm that procedures were followed, the focus may shift toward improving how redactions are communicated to the public. Clear explanations could prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. If, however, inconsistencies are identified, corrective measures could follow. Policy revisions, oversight reforms, or even personnel consequences. That process, if triggered, would unfold methodically rather than dramatically. For now, the narrative remains defined by contrast: a direct question, a prolonged pause, and competing interpretations of what that pause meant. In politics, meaning is often shaped as much by perception as by documentation. The next phase will depend on evidence. Audit trails, internal communications, and official statements will either reinforce confidence or demand further accountability. Until those details emerge, the hearing stands as a reminder that transparency is not simply declared, it must be demonstrated. And when trust is tested, clarity becomes more powerful than rhetoric. Whether this moment fades into routine oversight history or becomes a catalyst for reform, it underscores a fundamental truth. Accountability in public office is continuous, not occasional. A question was asked, the silence that followed sparked scrutiny. Now the responsibility shifts to institutions to provide answers, fully, clearly, and in the public interest. In the final analysis, this episode may be remembered less for confrontation and more for consequence. Institutions are strongest when scrutiny leads to clarity. If the review process delivers transparent explanations backed by verifiable records, confidence can be restored. If it does not, oversight will intensify. The system now faces a simple test: respond with evidence, not rhetoric. For the public, the takeaway is broader than one hearing or one official. Democratic accountability depends on persistent questioning and documented answers. Moments of silence may spark headlines, but lasting trust is built through openness. The next chapter will not be written by speculation, but by facts placed clearly on record.